Ghost with Cats, Chapter 28, Inked Ones. Tall seemed to be biting her forever and growling as he did it. His breath burned hot on her skin. He released his bite and whispered he loved her once more, but her eyes were closed. Annie could feel her tears and his on her cheek as he hugged her. I love you, my inked one. He laid her down gently on the concrete floor. Then it sounded like he was taking something out of his jacket pocket. I meant to give this to Breeze. If I don't make it, take care of him. Then she heard the door swing open, but not all the way shut. He was gone, and she couldn't move. She was so confused by his actions. Annie heard the SUV drive by again, then speed up. There was the pop of a silenced rifle. Brakes skidded, muffled men's voices, and then the tires burned out as the SUV headed back toward the harbor. She still couldn't lift her head, and her heart was barely beating. Her shoulder burned like it was on fire where he had bitten her. She breathed out slowly, focusing on the message for Vorn. Their enemy's name was Kali. Kali was after Tall's fleet to kill the king. Bring the flyers after dark and find him before tomorrow. Her paranoia screamed that Tall attacked her, and she owed him nothing. Her fear ranted about his betrayal as she sank toward darkness. A tiny kitten was butting its head against her face and mewing for attention. It was the only thing tethering her to consciousness. Inside the cottage, a million miles away it seemed, she could hear the murmur of Sharon's and Vorn's voices, talking and laughing. Sharon rolled over in bed. Somewhere outside the house, a crying kitten, was driving her crazy. Vorn felt warm, strong, and comfortable as she rested with his arms around her. But she sat up anyway, wrestling his t-shirt over her tasseled platinum curls. Vorn pulled her back against his chest. Don't leave yet, my lady, he pleaded playfully, kissing her shoulder and neck. She smiled at him, resting her hand against his cheek. I have to find that kitten and give it some cream before it drives me crazy. I'll be back. She leaned over and first pressed her lips lightly against his, then gave him a light lick on the temple. Sharon was a quick study with her lovers, always learning what they liked from the first time, but kissing an Eloh was an art. Vorn had very sharp, pointed teeth and claws when he was aroused, which he was incredibly careful with. He promised her he would not mar her beautiful skin, but she didn't care. She loved him anyway, in a way that she hadn't loved anyone since Shmael. Vorn made her feel alive again. He made her body want more of him. As water filled the coffee carafe for her and the tea kettle for him, she remembered. Halfway up the river last night they were ambushed, and he fought like a hero to protect her. They'd gotten lucky. Some kids peeled out in an old Camaro, and their pursuers chased them instead of checking the scrub trees and brush in the vacant lot where Sharon and Vorn hid. As they laid there, cautiously waiting, she rolled over. When she looked up into his eyes, Sharon realized she could see stars in the center of his pupils, just like the ones over his shoulder. Suddenly, she felt like her Shmael had come back to him as an angel. As Vorn to save her again from certain death. Even though she knew it was impossible, it didn't change the way she felt, and she kissed Vorn. They slipped into the house and practically tore each other's clothes off. He respectfully asked permission to touch her, to be joined with her, to leave his ink upon her skin. He treated her like the most precious thing in his world, just like her Shmael always had. She smiled, fingering her shoulder under his t-shirt. It didn't even hurt where he bit her. It just felt warm and made her heart flutter for a moment. The warmth pulled between her legs where he'd been only an hour before. They would be alone till at least noon, but she didn't feel alone for the first time in 10 years, and she planned to make the most of it, since this would be their only time together before he left. She tried not to think that far ahead. He was with her here, now. She could be selfish, just for a morning. She let herself have the luxury of a tingly shiver. The sooner she found the kitten and gave it some milk or something, the sooner she could crawl back into bed with her lover. She was going to show him why it was always better to date older women. The sun was just rising on the cloud-streaked horizon. The crying kitten was on the screen porch on the back of the cottage. She pushed to open the door, but something was against it. Sharon leaned against the screen, looked down, and panicked. It was Annie, and she was unconscious. She was so pale and still, Sharon couldn't tell if she was alive or not. Annie's shoulder looked swollen and red, like she was mauled by something. The tiniest brown kitten Sharon had ever seen was rubbing its face on Annie's, mewing piteously. "Vorn!" Sharon cried out in panic, trying to push the door open, but Annie's unconscious body wouldn't move. He was by her side instantly. He pulled on his jeans and ran around the house quickly to the back door. Lifting Annie carefully, he carried her in and laid her on the couch. Her heartbeat was irregular, her breathing shallow. She was feverish and muttering. Her shoulder was inked, but there was a problem. The ink wasn't spreading as it should. Annie's ink was harming her. It was swollen into red, ugly knots. Everyone beyond the priest and healer sect knew ink must be accepted during copulation. "We have to get her back to the Dunes house. There is medicine I made for her," he said. Grateful, he followed his intuition to prepare the antidote to ink rejection when he realized how Tal felt about her and the uncertainty if it would act like venom in a human. Annie's eyes were dilated as he lifted her eyelids. "She is having a reaction to the ink." Vorn was so grateful Sharon had accepted his ink in every way. "My Mercedes is in the garage. I'll get dressed," Sharon said, and ran into the bedroom. Vorn put his hand on Annie's temple and summoned her back to consciousness. "Annie, Annie," he whispered, "come talk to me." Annie's eyes fluttered open. "Vorn, I'm here. What happened?" "Tal attacked me. He said Kali was after the king and his fleet, and he, she cried, repeating, "he attacked me. He hit me, then he bit me. Like you bit Sharon. Am I gonna die too?" "You will not die, but you must stop fighting the ink. He could not ink you if he does not love you. Sharon did not die. I gave her my ink because I love her. Sharon returned. She knelt, holding Annie's hand as she smiled at him. Vaughan continued in a soft, calm tone. I do not know why he struck you unless he panicked. Lady Collie is extremely dangerous. He tried to get the master to ink her in his last lottery, because she desires to command one of the fleets. He has killed two of the master's allies, other admins. Tell me exactly what the master said to you, Vaughan insisted. Lady Collie was in the harbor. They were after him before the drugs wore off. She wanted his fleet to kill the king, to divide the kingdom. You were to bring flyers after dark. Collie would want to play games with him before she killed him. If he can't ink her, it will buy a day. He needs me to come and save him. I feel like I'm dying. My heart won't beat. Her head was spinning, and her heart felt like it was taking forever between beats. Annie, do you love Tall? Yes. Do you believe he loves you? Vaughan's voice was a soft plea. He attacked me. He bit me. He promised he wouldn't until I was ready, Annie murmured, hurt and confused. Her mind was going back and forth, around and around like a carousel. Every man she loved tried to kill her. Why did it feel so wonderful, then hurt so much to love? She thought. I know, but he bit you because he didn't want anyone else to have what he wanted for only you. Vaughan lifted her hand to the now painfully swollen welts on her shoulder. If you accept his love and his ink, half of all he commands is yours, and equal rank. Lady Collie drugged him to take what wasn't hers. She is one of the females that are the reason the higher tiers began to developing defenses against the lottery and its required drug. All needs you to accept his gift so you can share what is his and be strong enough to save him. Annie blinked up at him, then at Sharon, who said, Look, honey. She slid her cardigan off her shoulder. It revealed a strange, fractal, henna-styled pattern. I know you love him, but I also know you're scared. Tall gave you a gift and left you in a safe place and led them away. He loves you. You know it is true. Please, Annie, you can't live in fear anymore. You need to learn to live without your rules. You can't hide from love forever. It's your turn to be given love. Accept his love, Annie. Tears ran down Annie's face, and she closed her eyes. Sharon looked up at Vaughan and shrugged sadly. They wrapped Annie in a blanket and put her back in the back of Sharon's car with the tiny kitten. As Sharon drove, she reached over to squeeze Vaughan's hand. Vaughan, what will happen if she can't accept Tall's ink? A scowl clouded his beautiful features. They may both die. That is why I ask, why I wanted you to be sure. He turned his dark, beautiful sapphire eyes toward her. As I told you last night, we are now only for each other. You don't regret it, do you? She blushed as she smiled at him. Not a moment of it, and not ever. I will never want or love anyone else. At the Dunes house, Breeze was awake and hungover. Sharon made him breakfast. The sword pet was distressed to know Annie was ill and Tall was captured. With nothing to do, he sat in the Adirondack chair on the porch and held the giant tuxedo cat which moved in with them. Its purr was his only comfort. He prayed as Lady Annie taught him. He prayed he would be strong for his master and his lady, and for the light of the one who made all to help them. The tiny brown kitten climbed up Brisa's leg, walked across his lap, and the bigger cat then crawled onto his shoulder. It purred and purred in its kitten way, rubbing its face on Brisa's cheek for a long time before curling up and going to sleep. There was nothing they could do until evening, when their ships arrived. Vorn gave Annie a shot in her lower abdomen with a very long needle, and she slept. She dreamed first of Hadif and Tal, both. Her fear wanted to make them the same, but her heart wouldn't let it. She was in the hole trying to reach the case to disarm the bomb. Hadif kept cutting the rope, and Tal always lowered her a new one. When Tal pulled her up, it was into the meadow at New Moon Springs. She was a little girl again, and he a young boy. She and Tal were picking flowers for her mother with Mr. Tux. Hadif tried to chase them, but True saved them. In each dream, her fear faded a little more. Finally, her heart won. The pain in her shoulder turned to warmth. When Annie dreamed again, it was about Tal alone. She could see him bound to a bed. A tall woman was clawing and beating him. She had very dark auburn hair and black emerald eyes that held nothing but insane cruelty. It could only be Kali. She sneered at Tal and mocked him because he refused to comply. Annie could feel how much his body hurt in the dream, and she longed to comfort him. Tal, Annie whispered Tal's name. His eyes turned white, the stars within them shined like beacons, and he looked up at her in relief. You lived. She took his face in her hands. I love you. Go to sleep. I gave Vorn the message. We're coming for you. He closed his eyes and passed out. The woman screamed in rage as the dream faded. When Annie woke, it was late afternoon. The angry, swollen lumps were replaced by an elaborate, swirling, fractal patterned tattoo that covered an area larger than her hand on her left shoulder. Shakily, she got out of bed and stared at it in the bathroom window. Tal's ink covered her shoulder. It was beautiful. As she looked at it, she realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. Well, not as afraid as she usually was.